It was a night like any other, or so it seemed. In a small Bronx apartment, the hum of the refrigerator and the muffled sounds of late-night television filled the rooms. Children slept in their bunk beds, wrapped in the safety of routine. Their mother, Tasha Delaney, moved quietly through the home. Her husband, Marcus, was in another room, lost in his own thoughts. There was nothing to suggest the horror that was about to unfold. No loud arguments echoing down the hallway. No cries for help piercing the night. Just stillness. But by morning, Tasha was gone. No note. No goodbye. Not a single trace. Marcus told anyone who asked that she'd left early. Maybe for work. Maybe for some errand. He wasn't sure. The children, Ava and Noah, were too young to understand why Mommy wasn't there to pack their lunches or kiss them goodbye. But they felt the absence instantly, like the air itself had shifted. At first, there were no sirens. No frantic calls. Only whispers. Friends and family exchanged puzzled messages, assuming Tasha would reappear within hours. But hours turned into a day, and then another, and the unease began to gnaw at everyone who knew her. Neighbors remembered seeing Marcus that morning. Calm. Composed. Too composed. One would later say, it was like nothing had happened. Like he was playing a part. Then came the rumors. Late nights at the office. A man she'd been seen with. A tension inside the Delaney home that had been quietly growing for months. As the days passed, those whispers grew darker. People began to wonder if Tasha's absence wasn't by choice at all. And when the truth finally emerged, when investigators pieced together the movements, the lies, and the unimaginable steps Marcus had taken, it would leave an entire community speechless. Because Tasha Delaney's story was no longer just about a disappearance. It was about betrayal. It was about rage. And it was about a husband who turned the tools of his own profession into a weapon for the ultimate cover-up. The case would shake the city, not because of the brutality alone, but because of the cold precision in what happened next. What follows is the story of a marriage collapsing under secrets, of a man who believed he'd been wronged, and who made sure the world would never see his wife again. And it all began with a simple lie, hidden in plain sight. Marcus Delaney was no stranger to hard work. At 40 years old, he'd been with the New York City Department of Sanitation for over 5 years, driving garbage trucks through the Bronx in every kind of weather. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid union wages, came with benefits, and, at least on paper, offered stability. Most days, Marcus returned home bone-tired. His hands ached from lifting, his back stiff from hours behind the wheel. And when he stepped through the apartment door, he craved one thing: peace. But lately, there was none. Tasha, 39, worked in Manhattan as a secretary at a busy brokerage firm near Midtown. The job was steady, the hours predictable. At least, that's what Marcus thought. But in the months before her disappearance, her schedule began to shift. On Thursdays especially, she started staying later, claiming she had overflow work or that she was preparing packets for senior staff. It sounded harmless enough, but something in Marcus stirred. A small, uneasy voice told him something wasn't right. He noticed other changes too. Her hair, cut and styled differently, without a word to him. A new perfume, faint but unfamiliar, clinging to her clothes when she walked past. And the phone, always in her hand, never left unattended. Even walking from the kitchen to the bedroom, she took it with her, like it was a lifeline she couldn't risk losing. Conversations between them grew shorter. Meals went uneaten, left cold on the counter. And in those rare moments they did speak, the words were functional, not warm. No laughter, no teasing, just the business of living together. Marcus told himself it was stress, that everyone hit rough patches. He even spoke to his father, Samuel Delaney, about it. Samuel, a man of measured patience, told him, "Don't chase shadows, son. You'll lose your mind looking for ghosts that aren't there." But ghosts or not, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in his marriage, and not in his favor. Even Tasha's parents, Gloria and Leonard Harris, noticed the distance. When Marcus mentioned his concerns, they said she'd told them work was intense lately. They left it at that. No details, no reassurance. By early September 2019, the atmosphere inside their apartment had changed entirely. Marcus described it later with a single word: staged. The throw pillows always perfectly arranged. Surfaces wiped spotless. Everything in its place, except the warmth between them. And it wasn't just the house that felt cold. Tasha herself seemed to be moving through the motions of family life with a kind of polite detachment, present, but not truly there. Eye contact became rare. The rhythm of the household, once natural, now felt scripted. It might have stayed that way for months, a slow-motion decay, if not for a single, ordinary moment that changed everything. One evening, Marcus took the trash down. The bag snagged on the stairwell railing and tore open. It seemed trivial at first, just a mess to clean up. But buried in that trash was the first undeniable sign that Marcus's marriage was far from what it appeared. A sign that would set into motion a chain of events from which no one in the Delaney family would ever recover. It was nothing, at least it should have been. A torn trash bag, a few scattered scraps on the stairwell landing, an inconvenience in a long day. Marcus knelt, gathering what had spilled. Empty food wrappers, crumpled paper towels, a cereal box, oddly heavy in his hands. He almost tossed it straight into the bin, but something about the way it was sealed stopped him. The top was taped shut, not just folded, sealed with strips of transparent tape, pressed down tight. A strange choice for an empty box. Curiosity pried his fingers under the tape. It peeled away with a faint hiss, like it had been there for weeks. Inside, nestled against the cardboard, was a small white sleeve, and within that sleeve, a pregnancy test. Still in its original casing. The digital screen displayed a single, undeniable word. Positive. Marcus froze. His mind didn't race. It stalled, like an engine choked of air. He stared at the tiny screen, as if looking long enough would somehow make it change. It didn't. A month-old receipt, crumpled beside the test, told him exactly when it had been purchased and where. A pharmacy just 3 blocks from their apartment. He knew immediately it couldn't be his. He and Tasha hadn't been intimate for months. Not for lack of trying on his part. He'd reached out, tried to close the gap, but she had always turned away. Tired. Busy. Not in the mood. And now this. His hands trembled as he put the test back in the sleeve. The hallway around him felt suddenly too quiet, the air heavy, as though the walls themselves were listening. He slipped the sleeve into his jacket pocket and continued taking out the trash, moving on autopilot. That night, Marcus didn't confront her. Instead, he hid the test in the glove compartment of his car, like a dangerous secret he wasn't ready to detonate. Then he drove, nowhere in particular, past shuttered bodegas, under the orange glow of street lamps, the hum of the engine loud in the silence. When he returned home, Tasha was already asleep. Or at least, her bedroom light was off. He didn't check. The next day, Marcus told his father. Samuel listened quietly, his jaw tightening as Marcus laid out the discovery. But even then, Samuel's advice was measured. Don't do anything stupid. Let's find out what's real first. Still, the damage was done. The seed of suspicion had been watered with proof, and it was already taking root in Marcus's mind. He noticed things he might have overlooked before. Deleted call logs on her phone. A work retreat over the weekend that she'd never mentioned until the last minute. The way her eyes seemed to slide away from his when he tried to hold her gaze. And there was something else, something harder to define. It was in her posture, her voice, the way she moved through their apartment. She wasn't just distant. She was somewhere else entirely. Marcus didn't shout. He didn't demand answers. Not yet. Instead, he watched. And waited. He picked up extra early shifts. Spent more time away from home. And when he was there, he stayed quiet, letting her believe he'd pulled back out of exhaustion. But in truth, he was studying her. The way she smiled faintly when a text lit her phone. The quick, almost imperceptible check of the screen before she slipped it into her pocket. The faint trace of cologne, not his, lingering in the hallway after she passed. It was all adding up. And though he didn't yet have the full picture, Marcus knew one thing with certainty. The woman sleeping down the hall from him was no longer his wife in any way that mattered. What he didn't know yet was just how far he would go to prove it. Samuel Delaney had always been a man of patience, but when his son came to him with that pregnancy test, something shifted. He didn't say the words out loud, but in his gut, he knew there was more to the story. And so, Samuel offered to watch. Not confront. Not accuse. Just watch. A week later, Samuel was standing across the street from Tasha's office building in Midtown. The late September air had a damp chill, and the traffic hummed around him. He had been there for nearly an hour before he saw her. Tasha emerged from the glass doors in a fitted coat, her hair shining under the gray light. She scanned the sidewalk, not like someone in a hurry to catch the train, but like someone waiting. And then he saw him. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped out from the crowd. Darren Cole. Samuel recognized him instantly, not from recent memory, but from decades past. He'd grown up in the same Bronx housing complex as Marcus, a familiar face from another time. That familiarity made Samuel's stomach tighten. The two stood close, their heads angled toward each other, voices low. No embrace, no obvious intimacy. But there was something, a comfort that didn't belong between casual coworkers. They walked to a cafe down the block, sat at a corner table for more than 30 minutes. Samuel watched every second, his breath misting in the air. When they finally parted ways, the look on his face was all Marcus needed. The confirmation was there, even without a kiss, even without a touch. Marcus didn't explode, not outwardly. Instead, he became deliberate. That night, while Tasha was in the shower, he slipped into their bedroom, pulled her tote bag onto the bed, and carefully slit the lining inside. From his pocket, he produced a small GPS tracker, no bigger than a matchbox. It slid neatly into the seam. He smoothed the lining, replaced the bag exactly as he found it, and walked out without a sound. From that moment, Tasha's movements were no longer hers alone. The next morning, Marcus stayed home, claiming exhaustion. But his eyes were fixed on his phone, watching a small blinking dot move across a digital map. At 10:15 a.m., that dot shifted north. Marcus threw on his jacket, drove into Manhattan, and parked near her office. He stayed in his car, one hand on the wheel, the other holding his phone, watching the tracker like a hawk. At 12:45 p.m., the dot moved again, west, toward Upper Manhattan. Marcus followed, each traffic light pulling the knot in his chest tighter. The signal stopped at an address registered to Darren Cole. He didn't rush up to the door. He didn't shout. Instead, he parked half a block away and waited. Minutes later, Tasha and Darren emerged from a sleek, silver Lexus. They walked together to the front steps of Darren's building. Marcus lifted his phone and took the shot, a frozen image of his wife on another man's stoop. It wasn't proof of an affair in the eyes of the law. But for Marcus, it was the final nail in a coffin he'd been building in his mind for weeks. He sent the photo to his father. Samuel called almost immediately, his voice tight. "Son, come home. Leave it alone. Don't do anything you can't take back." Marcus didn't answer that plea. Instead, he drove to his father's house, dropped off Ava and Noah without explanation, and went back to the apartment on Prospect Avenue. And then, he waited. Every minute stretched like an hour. Outside, the city carried on, sirens in the distance, neighbors coming and going. But inside, the walls seemed to close in. Marcus replayed the image of her on that stoop, over and over, each time feeling the blood rise hotter in his veins. When Tasha finally walked through the door, just after 8:30 p.m., she had no idea the night was about to become the last of her life. The apartment door clicked shut. For a brief second, there was silence, just the faint rattle of keys as Tasha set them on the counter. Marcus stepped out from the shadows of the living room. She froze. Something in his stance made her pause, shoulders squared, arms stiff at his sides, eyes locked on her like a man staring at a verdict. He didn't bother with small talk. From his jacket pocket, he pulled the photograph, the one from Darren Cole's stoop, then the pregnancy test, then the crumpled receipt. He laid them on the table between them, each item hitting the surface with a dull, deliberate thud. "What is this, Tasha?" His voice was low, measured, almost calm, but it was the kind of calm that trembles just before it shatters. She looked down at the evidence, then back at him. Her mouth opened, then closed. "Finally," she said, "it's not what you think." Marcus's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Not what I think. You haven't touched me in months. And now you're pregnant. I followed you, Tasha. I saw you. At his place." She took a step back. "It's not new. I was pregnant before things got bad between us. It's over now. You're twisting this." But Marcus was past the point of untwisting anything. "You've been lying to me. To our kids. To my face every day. And for what?" Him. Her eyes flashed. Fear. Anger. Something else. "You don't understand. You don't even try to understand." He cut her off, his voice rising. "I understand you've been sneaking around, making me feel crazy in my own home. I understand you've been letting another man touch what's mine." The last word cracked in the air like a whip. Neighbors later told police they heard shouting, voices colliding like waves against rock, furniture scraping across the floor, a heavy thud that made the plaster tremble. Marcus's own account, later given in a halting confession, filled in the rest. He said he lashed out, struck her. She stumbled, her head hitting the floor with a sickening sound that seemed to echo in his skull. She gasped, tried to push herself up, and that's when something inside him broke completely. He dropped to his knees, his hands closing around her neck. At first, she struggled, clawing at his wrists, kicking against the hardwood. But Marcus's grip only tightened. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts until it didn't come at all. The apartment went silent. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it swallows it whole. Marcus stayed there for a moment, kneeling over her, the weight of what he'd done pressing against his chest. Then he let go. Her body lay still, eyes half open, fixed on nothing. He didn't call 911, didn't try to explain. Instead, his mind turned to what came next, not in hours, but in minutes. He pulled the blinds closed, locked the door, and for the next several hours, he moved through the apartment like a man on autopilot, avoiding the bedroom, keeping to the kitchen and living room, drinking water in small, mechanical sips. Every so often, he would glance toward the hallway where her body lay. He told himself it was just for a moment longer, just until he figured it out. But as the night deepened, the idea began to take shape, a plan that was as brutal as it was calculated. Marcus wasn't going to hide her in a closet or drag her into some alley. He was going to make sure she disappeared completely. And in a bitter twist of irony, he was going to use the very machinery that had paid their bills for years. By the time the clock read 2:40 a.m., Marcus knew exactly what he was going to do. At 2:40 a.m., the city was draped in the kind of darkness that makes everything feel still, but Marcus Delaney's heart was pounding like a war drum. He slipped out of the apartment, locking the door behind him, and made his way toward the Hunts Point sanitation yard where he worked. The place was dead quiet, just the hum of distant traffic and the faint clink of chains on a swinging gate. Inside the guard shack sat Frank Dorsey, the night attendant. Marcus stepped in, the faint scent of oil and rubber in the air, and spoke low. "Frank, I need access. Got an old couch, bed bugs. Can't leave it in the building. You know how it is." Frank hesitated. Unscheduled use of the yard wasn't unheard of, but it was logged, recorded, checked later. Marcus reached into his pocket, pulled out a wad of bills. $200. Frank glanced at the cash, then at Marcus's face. Whatever he saw there was enough to make him slide the bills into his desk drawer. Without another word, he unlocked the gate. Marcus walked through the rows of parked sanitation trucks, the metal giants looming in the dim yard lights. He found the one he wanted, unit number 1147, a front loader he knew inside and out. The cab smelled faintly of grease and diesel, familiar and almost comforting in the worst possible way. He started the engine. The low, rumbling growl vibrated through his bones. Driving through the empty streets at that hour was surreal. The city felt hollowed out, stripped of its chaos. Streetlights passed overhead in slow, rhythmic flashes, each one illuminating the wrapped shape lying in the cargo space of his mind before fading to black again. By 3:10 a.m., Marcus was double-parked outside his own building. Across the street, on a third-floor balcony, Terrence Miles stepped out for a smoke. He squinted at the sight, a garbage truck idling in the dark, hazard lights pulsing. And then he saw Marcus, dragging something long and heavy, wrapped tightly in what looked like a rolled carpet and bound with black contractor bags. The shape was unmistakable. Not to Terrence in that moment, maybe, but to us, now, it's clear. Marcus grunted with the effort, hoisting the bundle toward the compactor hopper. The metal groaned under the weight. He climbed up, pushed, adjusted his grip, and finally managed to tip the load inside. For a beat, nothing happened. Then the hydraulics kicked in. The compactor's crushing arm came down with a deep, mechanical roar. The sound was final, irreversible. Terrence took one last drag from his cigarette, thinking it was just bulky furniture. Maybe the couch Marcus had mentioned to Frank, and went back inside. Marcus didn't linger. He drove straight back to Hunts Point, the truck's tires whispering over the asphalt. By 3:26 a.m., unit number 1147 was parked exactly where it had been. The keys returned. No record of its use. When the sun rose, that same truck would be taken out by another sanitation worker, Curtis Boone, for routine pickups, completely unaware of what it had crushed just hours earlier. From there, the load would be taken to the Manhattan transfer station in Inwood, where it would join tons of other refuse from across the boroughs. Within hours, it was bound for a massive landfill in Kearny, New Jersey, an ocean of garbage that stretched for acres. Somewhere in that endless expanse, under layers of compacted waste, lay what was left of Tasha Delaney. Marcus returned home before dawn. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator. The smell of cleaning agents still lingered faintly in the air. When Ava and Noah woke, their father was in the kitchen, making breakfast like nothing had happened. He smiled, told them Mommy wasn't feeling well and would be home soon. Then he picked up her phone and typed a message to her supervisor. Tasha's sick. Won't be in today. Sent from her number, in her name. It was the first lie in a series that would carry him through the next 3 days. But lies have a way of collapsing under their own weight. And for Marcus Delaney, the collapse was already on its way. The morning after Tasha's body vanished into the compactor, Marcus slipped seamlessly into a role he thought he could play forever, the calm, concerned husband of a woman who had simply left. He started with the little things. A text to her supervisor. Tasha's sick. Won't be in today. Sent from her own phone, just as he'd done before. A short explanation to Ava and Noah over breakfast. Mommy's resting. She just needs some space. He said it with such quiet certainty that, for a moment, even he might have believed it. That day, Marcus kept up appearances, took the kids to school, ran errands, came home at the usual time. The apartment, now scrubbed within an inch of its life, looked like nothing out of place had ever happened inside its walls. But the problem with lies is that they have to be fed, and Marcus fed his with more lies. When Gloria Harris, Tasha's mother, called later that afternoon, Marcus told her Tasha wasn't feeling well. She's in bed, he said, his voice calm but clipped. Didn't want to talk much. Gloria didn't push, not yet, but something in the tone unsettled her. That night, she sent a follow-up text to her daughter. It read, "How are you feeling, sweetheart? Need anything?" An hour later, she got a reply. "I'm okay. Just need rest. No greeting. No love you, Mom. No familiar warmth. Just cold words on a screen." Over the next 2 days, Marcus repeated the script to anyone who asked. Tasha had left voluntarily, he told Samuel. She'd been talking to someone else. Said she deserved better. The phrasing was neat, practiced, like he'd rehearsed it in his head. Still, cracks began to form. No one had actually seen Tasha since that Thursday night. She hadn't called her kids. She hadn't reached out to friends. And Gloria's unease had turned into something closer to alarm. On the second day, Gloria's calls to Tasha's phone went unanswered altogether. The text messages stopped. And when she pressed Marcus for more details, his responses became vague. "She's figuring things out," he said. "Give her time." By the third day, Samuel could no longer ignore his own doubts. Something about his son's calmness felt wrong, like the air in a room just before a storm breaks. That afternoon, Samuel picked up the phone and dialed 911. He didn't give his name. "I'm a concerned neighbor," he told the dispatcher. "There's a woman in my building who hasn't been seen in days. No one can reach her. Can you do a welfare check?" Within the hour, 2 officers from the 42nd Precinct were knocking on Marcus's door. He cracked it open no more than 6 inches, leaning casually against the frame. "She's not here," he said. "Needs some privacy." The officers asked to come inside, just to confirm she was okay. Marcus refused. "It's not a good time," he said, keeping his tone light. "She's fine. Trust me." With no warrant and no visible signs of distress, the officers left, filing a brief report of the encounter. Marcus might have thought he'd won that round, but in reality, the clock had just started ticking. Because Gloria wasn't about to wait around. And the next time she showed up at Marcus's door, she wouldn't be leaving quietly. By the 4th day, Gloria Harris wasn't just worried. She was done with the polite calls and unanswered texts. She wanted to see her daughter, with or without Marcus's permission. That afternoon, she arrived at the Prospect Avenue apartment unannounced. The hallway outside smelled faintly of bleach, and her pulse quickened as she knocked hard on the door. Marcus answered. His expression was flat, almost bored. "I want to see Tasha," Gloria said, pushing past any pleasantries. "She's not here," Marcus replied. "I told you, she needed some space." "I'm her mother," Gloria shot back. "If she's here, I'm going in." He stepped into the doorway, blocking her path. "She's not here," he repeated, his voice hardening. "And you're not coming in." The argument exploded from there, Gloria demanding answers, Marcus refusing to budge, voices echoing down the hallway. Neighbors cracked their doors, peering out. A small crowd began to gather near the stairwell. When Gloria tried to push past him, Marcus slapped her hand away from the doorframe. It wasn't a hard blow, but it was enough. Someone called the police. Minutes later, patrol officers were on the scene. They found Gloria and Marcus still in a heated exchange, their words sharp enough to cut glass. The officers separated them immediately. Gloria's voice shook as she told them she feared something had happened to her daughter. Marcus was less cooperative, calm but defensive, claiming it was a family matter, and that his wife had left of her own accord. One officer pulled Marcus aside, telling him they needed to come in for a wellness check. He started to refuse again, until the other officer, noting the physical interference with Gloria, declared exigent circumstances. That was all they needed to step inside. The apartment was neat. Too neat. The officers walked slowly through the living room and into the bedroom Marcus shared with Tasha. That's when the first red flags appeared. A large area rug that had once covered most of the floor was gone. Just bare hardwood now, gleaming under fresh polish. The bed was made, but the mattress was stripped of its usual comforter, replaced with a new fitted sheet that looked like it had just been pulled from the package. The sharp scent of a strong cleaning agent lingered in the air, clinging to the walls and furniture. On the nightstand sat a box of disposable latex gloves, half empty. The officers exchanged a look. This wasn't the bedroom of a woman who had casually packed a bag and walked out. This was the scene of something else. They left the apartment and informed their supervisor of the irregularities. Marcus was taken to the 42nd precinct, not yet for murder, but on a charge of disorderly conduct stemming from the altercation with Gloria. There, in an interview room, he repeated his story. Tasha left. She'd been planning it for a while. She was with someone else now. But even as he spoke, detectives were already mapping out his lies and preparing to unravel them. Detectives didn't waste time. While Marcus Delaney sat in an interview room spinning the same tired lines about Tasha leaving on her own, a forensic team was back at the apartment, looking for what the naked eye couldn't see. Using Blue Star reagent, they sprayed along the bedroom walls and floor. Under the glow of their lights, faint shapes emerged, a crescent-shaped stain low on the wall, tiny droplets hidden in the grooves between the floorboards. The chemicals lit them up like ghosts. Samples were taken. DNA testing confirmed what they already suspected. The blood was Tasha's. Meanwhile, detectives pulled the GPS data from the small tracker Marcus had planted in Tasha's tote bag. Even though he thought he'd been the only one watching that blinking dot, the device still carried a full record of her movements. The data told a damning story. On the afternoon of September 26th, she left work early, 2:18 p.m., and went directly to the residence of Darren Cole. The tracker signal remained there for hours. It was the last location pinged before going dark that evening. They confronted Darren, who initially claimed he hadn't seen Tasha in days. But when they showed him the security logs from the brokerage parking facility, his garage access card scanning just minutes after she left, he faltered. He admitted to the affair, yes, but insisted she'd left his apartment alive and well. He claimed they'd talked about ending things, that she was conflicted about her marriage. He denied knowing anything about her disappearance. With no direct evidence tying Darren to the crime, detectives shifted their focus back to Marcus, because the physical clues were lining up in only one direction. Next came the sanitation yard records. An unusual entry caught their attention. Unit number 1147, a front-loader truck, accessed between 2:43 a.m. and 3:26 a.m. on September 27th, hours when Marcus was not scheduled to work. No reason for the entry was logged. Security cameras confirmed it. The truck leaving the yard, then returning less than an hour later. At the gate was Frank Dorsey, the night attendant. At first, Frank denied everything. But when pressed, he admitted Marcus had shown up, claimed he was disposing of a bedbug-infested couch, and slipped him $200 to keep quiet. Frank's testimony cracked open the timeline. And then came Terrence Miles, the neighbor across the street. He told detectives he'd been smoking on his balcony around 3:15 a.m. when he saw Marcus double-parked in the garbage truck, hauling along, heavy bundle wrapped in what looked like a carpet and thick black bags. He'd watched Marcus lift it into the compactor and activate the hydraulics. At the time, he thought it was just furniture. Now he wasn't so sure. With those statements in hand, detectives contacted the Department of Sanitation for the truck's next-day service log. Unit number 1147 had been used that morning by Curtis Boone for a normal pickup route. By the end of the shift, the load had been dumped at the Manhattan Transfer Station in Inwood, then transported to a massive landfill in Kearny, New Jersey. By the time this chain was uncovered, thousands of tons of mixed refuse had been buried under acres of compacted waste. The chances of recovering Tasha's remains were virtually zero. Investigators now had forensic evidence of blood in the bedroom, digital evidence from the GPS tracker, eyewitness testimony from Terrence Miles and Frank Dorsey, sanitation yard records matching Marcus's unauthorized use of the truck. Each piece alone might raise suspicion. Together, they painted a picture that was almost impossible to deny. When detectives confronted Marcus again, they pressed him with the evidence. His story shifted. At first, he repeated that Tasha had left for someone else. Then he suggested maybe Darren had taken her. Later, he admitted to disposing of a moldy rug, claiming he lied because he didn't want to be embarrassed about the smell. But the detectives didn't buy it. They could see the walls closing in, and so could he. By early 2020, the Bronx District Attorney's Office was ready. They didn't have a body. They didn't have a murder weapon. What they had was a web of evidence so tight that the absence of a corpse didn't weaken it. It sharpened it. Assistant District Attorney Rachel Morgan took the lead. In her opening statement, she didn't sugarcoat the difficulty of the case. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will not see a body in this courtroom, but you will see the truth. You will see it in the blood that was cleaned but not erased. You will see it in the lies the defendant told. You will see it in the garbage truck that swallowed a human life whole. The prosecution's case unfolded like clockwork. First came the pregnancy test and pharmacy receipt, found hidden inside a taped cereal box. Dated a month before Tasha's disappearance, it established motive, a betrayal Marcus couldn't tolerate. Then the GPS tracker, its data showing Tasha's visit to Darren Cole's apartment the very afternoon she vanished. Combined with Darren's own reluctant admission of an affair, it placed her at the center of Marcus's growing rage. Neighbors from the building testified about the loud argument that night, the shouting, the sound of furniture scraping, and the single, heavy thud followed by silence. Forensic experts described the crescent-shaped bloodstain behind the baseboard in the bedroom, the droplets trapped in the floor seams, and how chemical testing revealed what scrubbing could not. The jury saw photographs of the stripped bed, the missing rug, and the box of latex gloves, objects that seemed mundane until placed in context. Then came the sanitation records. A supervisor testified that unit number 1147 had been taken out in the early hours of September 27 without authorization. Surveillance footage from the Hunts Point yard showed Marcus driving it out and back again. Frank Dorsey took the stand, admitting under oath that Marcus had bribed him for access that night. The $200 bribe bought not only entry, but silence. Silence Frank broke in exchange for a plea deal. Terrence Miles followed, telling the jury what he saw from his balcony. Marcus hauling a long, heavy, carpet-wrapped object into the compactor hopper, then activating the machine. His description of the shape, human-sized, unmoving, hung in the courtroom air like a shadow. Finally, Samuel Delaney was called. His testimony was quiet but devastating. He told the jury about Marcus finding the pregnancy test, about his own surveillance of Tasha, and about the phone call the day Marcus followed her to Darren's stoop. His voice broke as he said, "I thought I was keeping something from breaking. I didn't know it had already broken." The defense leaned hard on the absence of a body. They argued that without direct forensic proof of death, no autopsy, no cause, there was room for doubt. They suggested Tasha may have left voluntarily, running from both her marriage and her affair. They painted Marcus's actions as those of a desperate man, abandoned and humiliated, but not a killer. But the jury didn't buy it. The weight of the evidence, the blood, the GPS, the truck, the witnesses, was too much. On the 11th day of deliberations, the foreperson rose. Guilty on all counts. Second-degree murder. Tampering with physical evidence. Bribery. The sentence came swiftly. 25 years to life for murder, 3 years concurrent for evidence tampering, and 1 year concurrent for bribery. Marcus stared straight ahead as the judge read the sentence. No apology. No final words. For Ava and Noah, custody was granted to Gloria and Leonard Harris. The children were not present in court. The last image the jury saw before being dismissed was the evidence photo of a cereal box, slit neatly along one side, holding the pregnancy test and the receipt that had started it all. When the words "guilty on all counts" rang out in the Bronx County Supreme Court, the room seemed to hold its breath. Marcus Delaney sat motionless at the defense table. No slumped shoulders, no visible reaction, just a hollow stillness, as if the verdict had landed somewhere far away from him. Across the aisle, Gloria Harris gripped Leonard's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had braced herself for this moment, telling herself that justice mattered more than anything else. But hearing it, the reality was different. Justice was cold. Justice didn't bring her daughter back. The judge wasted no time. For the charge of second-degree murder, he said, the sentence is 25 years to life. Marcus's eyes stayed fixed ahead. For the charge of tampering with physical evidence, 3 years, concurrent. Still no movement. For the charge of bribery, 1 year, concurrent. When asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, Marcus shook his head. No, Your Honor. His voice was barely audible, flat, drained of all fight. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. In the gallery, reporters scribbled notes, the keys of their laptops clicking like tiny hammers. The headline was already forming in their minds. Sanitation worker sentenced in wife's disappearance. No body ever found. Marcus was led from the courtroom in handcuffs. He didn't look back. Not at the jury. Not at his family. Not at the children he would never tuck into bed again. The custody ruling for Ava and Noah had already been decided. They would live with Gloria and Leonard, the court deeming it in their best interest to be far from their father. Neither child was told the full truth. Not yet. They only knew Mommy was gone, and Daddy wasn't coming home. The official case file ended with a photograph. A simple cereal box, its side slit clean, the tape still clinging to the cardboard. Inside, the pregnancy test and the crumpled receipt. Mute, unblinking witnesses to the moment everything began to unravel. Marcus was gone to prison. But for those left behind, the sentence was just beginning. In 2021, nearly 2 years after she vanished, Tasha Delaney was declared legally deceased by the Bronx County Court. The paperwork was clinical, stripped of emotion, a formality for a life that had been anything but. There was no casket, no graveside service, no place for Ava and Noah to lay flowers or whisper goodnight. Her remains lay somewhere beneath acres of compacted refuse in a New Jersey landfill, buried under thousands of tons of other people's discarded lives. Retrieving them had been impossible from the start. A cruel reality that left her family with no physical goodbye. For Gloria and Leonard Harris, grief became a quiet, stubborn presence in their home. Some mornings, it came as a weight pressing on the chest, making it hard to rise from bed. Other days, it was a dull ache, a hollow where laughter used to be. The children asked questions. Simple at first, when will Mommy come home? And later, more complicated. Gloria and Leonard answered as gently as they could, each word chosen to shield as much as it revealed. But no answer could fill the void. Even now, the details of those last hours echo in the minds of those who followed the case. The cereal box, the photograph on the stoop, the sound of the compactor swallowing its load in the dark. Marcus Delaney's actions had been as deliberate as they were irreversible, and though the court had spoken, the story never truly ended. Not for the family, not for the investigators, not for the neighbors who still glanced at that balcony across the street and remembered the night a garbage truck idled beneath it. Justice had been served in the eyes of the law. But closure? That was another matter entirely. And so, Tasha's name lives on in the whispers of those who knew her, in the memories of 2 children who remember her laugh more than her absence, and in the cautionary tale of a marriage that turned deadly under the weight of suspicion, betrayal, and rage. No grave, no marker, just a lingering truth that in the city that never sleeps, some secrets are buried so deep they're never meant to be found.